Thank you. Let me ask you a couple questions. I want to pick up where Senator Coons left off on the issue on debt ceiling. We are currently using extraordinary measures. Do extraordinary measures have a cost to the taxpayer?
Yes, they do.
Give me a good guess of what extraordinary measures cost the taxpayer when we move past the debt ceiling limit time period and wait and delay that decision on that action.
Well, there is a significant cost, and it's twofold. So the first cost is a real cost, which is right now effectively, as opposed to borrowing in the market at lower rates, we're borrowing and making our trust funds whole at slightly higher rates. So there is a real cost to doing that. There's also a implied cost of uncertainty into the market, and the longer we wait, the more that uncertainty will be. So again, I fully urge Congress to deal with this issue as soon as possible.
So I'd talk through a couple things on that. The best guess that I have in working with your team and trying to get an accurate number of the cost of extraordinary measures is around $2.5 billion to the taxpayer in real dollars that we pay in because we're covering our own interest to be able to do that. That's a significant cost and a loss to the taxpayer. Second thing is, as you and I have spoken about before, we should and will do a debt limit issue because that's taken care of already when budget decisions are made. There is something that has to be resolved at that point. My request to you is to be able to work with Congress to be able to figure out a way that when we get to a debt limit moment, we do address the issue of debt, because we can't just ignore that and continue to be able to pile on debt and assume there is no consequence. But those key moments should be with the fiscal year decisions that we make and how we resolve those issues, and to be able to find some sort of consistent calendar. What I have recommended is a 2-year debt limit time period, that every 2 years we have to address this, and it has to come up and to try to determine, do we have the deficit going up or down? If the deficit is going down, then the president has the authority to be able to make the decision on the debt limit. If the deficit is rising or is static, then Congress has to debate it. That forces us to get back to, how are we dealing with the issue of deficit? For me, we have $500 billion in overspending this year. We can't just pretend that's going to go away. We do have to address it, and I believe a debt ceiling moment is a moment to address it. But if we're actually cutting away at the deficit, I think that should be a process that's ongoing and very, very predictable. The only time it's not predictable is the moment when the deficits are rising or static, because then there's something has to be addressed at that moment, and we have to be able to take that on. We'll have further conversations on this because I want to continue to press on this. Let me ask you a question, again, following up on some of the things that Senator Coons was saying as well about some of the international actions. Outline the steps for me that Treasury is taking right now to deal with the finances of Hezbollah. This has been a focus in previous administrations that I think needs continued attention. What are we doing currently to be able to deal with the finances of a known terrorist organization like Hezbollah, and what are we doing to be able to limit their access to the world market?
Well, let me just assure you that it's a major focus of ours. I don't want to go through in this public environment the specifics of what we're doing, but I'm happy to meet with you privately and have you have a classified briefing. But
Great.
I can assure you that it is a major focus of mine and this administration.
Terrific. We'll get a chance to visit another time in a closed session on that. You had mentioned to Senator Capito as well some of the actions that you're taking to deal with community banking. I'd like to ask you two specific issues on that. If we're going to release the economy and some of the regulatory issues that you have mentioned both in public statements and in your written statement today, one of the things is going to be community banking and community lending again. What recommendations would you make to Congress of actions that we need to take that you are limited on and can't respond to the issues with community banking that we need to respond to? And the second one is the qualified mortgage issue. What can be done to be able to help? In my state, there are very few banks now that do mortgage lending anymore, which used to be the anchor for a rural state like Oklahoma, but very few banks can do it anymore because of the QM rules. So recommendations you'd make to Congress for things you can do that we need to do for community banking and the QM rules.
So thank you. Those are very important issues, and I look forward to working with you on it. So we do have a laundry list of items that we recommended to Congress. Some of them I would highlight are raising the $50 billion threshold so that we can have regional banks that can continue to grow. I think that's too low of a limit. under the current Dodd-Frank rules. And I know there's been bipartisan support for raising that, so I look forward to working with Congress on that. You also mentioned the qualified mortgage exemption. That's also something we think needs to be looked at. And more importantly, housing reform. So right now, we have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that have existed in conservatorship. As I've said publicly before, I am committed that we have a long-term solution to housing and that these are not controlled by the government for the next 4 years. And also looking at FHA as part of that. I'm concerned that FHA has gone from a 10% market share to 20% market share and has displaced proper bank lending. Community banks know how to make loans. They should be encouraged to make loans and keep them on their balance sheet and not forced to make loans to be securitized or turned into FHA or Fannie or Freddie's.
Well, I would completely agree. They can keep it on their books, and that's a very safe way to be able to protect the economy. And what's happening within that bank, 40% of the banks in Oklahoma no longer make mortgage loans anymore, 40% and rising because of the QM rules that have been put on them. That's very toxic for those communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Manchin.